The Appalachian Trail is supposed to be a sanctuary. Every year, millions step into these ancient woods to find peace. But for a terrifying few, the trail becomes a trap. Today, we're covering the 10 most disturbing, unexplained disappearances in Appalachian history. From hikers who were hunted to people who simply evaporated into thin air, these stories prove that sometimes the woods are watching back. If you enjoyed deep dives into the dark and unexplained, please hit that subscribe button and like the video. It really supports the channel. Now, check your gear and stay close, because we're going in. It's May 1996, Shenandoah National Park, Virginia. Picture this: the Appalachian Trail is waking up from winter. The dogwoods are blooming white and pink against the ridgelines. Skyline Drive is packed with families in minivans, their kids pressing faces against windows, pointing at deer. The air smells like fresh pine and possibility. This is not some remote, godforsaken stretch of wilderness. This is America's backyard, a place where retirees go to birdwatch and teenagers go to make out at overlooks. And in late May, two women, experienced, capable, strong, decide to spend a few days hiking and camping in this beautiful, supposedly safe national park. Their names were Julianne Williams and Lolly Winans. Julie was 24, a geologist from Minnesota. She'd just graduated summa cum laude from Carleton College. She was a former state tennis champion, athletic, sharp, the kind of person who could navigate both a chemistry lab and a whitewater rapid. She had a new job waiting for her in Vermont on June 1st. This camping trip was her victory lap before starting the next chapter. Lolly was 26. She was studying to become a wilderness guide at Unity College in Maine. Let me repeat that: a wilderness guide. This wasn't someone who got lost on a nature walk. Lolly had grown up in a well-off family in Michigan, but she'd rejected that comfortable life for something real. She was a fish fan, a micro-brewed beer drinker, someone who found healing in the woods. Lolly was also a survivor of past sexual assault, and she'd come to view the wilderness as her sanctuary, a place where she could reclaim power and safety. They brought Lolly's golden retriever with them, a big, beautiful dog named Taj. So here's what you need to understand. These weren't naive college kids stumbling into the woods with a gas station map and flip-flops. These were two smart, experienced women who knew what they were doing. And they had a dog, a natural alarm system, a deterrent, a protector. They set up camp off the Bridle Trail near milepost 42 of Skyline Drive. The spot was idyllic. There was a mountain stream nearby, creating that peaceful white noise that makes you feel like you're miles from civilization. But here's the thing: they weren't. They were less than half a mile from the Skyland Resort, a popular tourist lodge with a restaurant, gift shop, and parking lot full of families. You could practically hear the laughter of kids eating ice cream cones. This is the contrast that makes the Shenandoah murders so deeply unsettling. They weren't in the deep backcountry, they were in a place that felt safe. May 24th, 1996. It's a Friday. Memorial Day weekend is starting. The park is filling up with visitors. Somewhere in those woods, near that peaceful stream, something unthinkable happens. We don't know the exact timeline of that night. What we do know is this: Julie and Lolly don't come home. May 28th passes. That's when Julie was supposed to report to her new job in Vermont. She doesn't show up. Her roommate gets worried. Then her father gets the call. Julie hasn't returned. She's not answering calls. Something is wrong. By May 31st, the missing persons report is official. Park rangers start searching, and then, on June 1st, 1996, they find the campsite. The blue and yellow tent is still standing. Taj, the golden retriever, is wandering around the area. He's thirsty, scared, but alive, unharmed. The rangers call out the women's names. No response. They approach the tent. Inside, they find Julianne Williams and Lolly Winans. Both women are dead. Both are bound. Both have had their throats cut. Now, let me stop here, because this is where the entire psychological landscape of the Appalachian Trail changes. For decades, the AT had been seen as a communal space, a 2,200-mile ribbon of dirt where strangers became friends, where trail magic meant someone left you a soda in a cooler, where the worst thing that could happen was a twisted ankle or a bear getting into your food. But this was different. This was a calculated, brutal attack on two strong women in what was supposed to be a safe place. And here's what made it even more terrifying. The scene didn't make sense. Think about the logistics. These women were camped near a stream. The white noise would have masked approaching footsteps, but they had a dog. Dogs bark, dogs growl, dogs attack. Yet Taj was found alive and unharmed. So what happened? Did the killer know the dog? Was Taj secured somehow without violence? Or was the killer simply indifferent, so focused on the women that the dog didn't matter? And the victims themselves. Julie was a state tennis champion. Lolly was training to be a wilderness guide. These were not passive targets. For someone to subdue both of them, bind them, and kill them, that person had to be strong, controlled, and terrifyingly methodical. This wasn't a robbery. Expensive camping gear was left behind. Their jewelry was there. This wasn't about money. This was about power. For 28 years, the Shenandoah murders haunted the trail community. It became the case, the unsolved horror that proved the woods weren't safe anymore, or maybe they never had been. Investigators chased leads. In 2001, they thought they had their man, Darrell David Rice, a drifter with a criminal history. The Department of Justice went so far as to invoke hate crime statutes, suggesting Julie and Lolly had been targeted because they were a same-sex couple. Rice was indicted. But by 2004, DNA evidence cleared him. The charges were dismissed. The case went cold again. And for 2 more decades, the question hung in the air like smoke. Who did this? Female hikers changed how they moved through the world. Solo camping became riskier. The idea of the Appalachian Trail as a safe place evaporated. Because if 2 experienced, capable women with a dog couldn't be safe half a mile from a resort, then who could? June 2024. Nearly 30 years after the murders, the FBI makes an announcement. They've got him, not through a confession, not through a witness coming forward, through DNA, advanced genetic genealogy, the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer, finally produced a match. The killer's name was Walter Leo Jackson Sr. He was from Ohio, a convicted serial rapist. And here's the gut punch. He'd been dead since 2018. He died in prison, serving time for other crimes, never once admitting to what he did in Shenandoah. The FBI confirmed it with a certainty level rarely seen in forensic cases. It was him. No doubt. So who was Walter Leo Jackson? He was an avid hiker. He drove a 1984 AMC Eagle, later a Ford Econoline van, vehicles he registered with temporary tags to stay under the radar. He moved, he traveled. He was essentially a transient predator who used the national parks as hunting grounds. And this is the final, chilling realization. Julie and Lolly weren't targeted because they were women in love. They weren't stalked because they represented something to him. They were simply there. Wrong place, wrong time. A random intersection of a predator on vacation and 2 women who thought they were safe. The FBI confirmed there was no evidence this was a hate crime. It was opportunity. It was a man who saw vulnerability and exploited it. Let's talk about what we'll never know. We know who killed them, but we don't know how he approached the campsite without the dog alerting them. We don't know if he stalked them earlier in the day, maybe passing them on the trail, nodding politely, just another hiker. We don't know what he said, if anything, before the violence started. Walter Leo Jackson took those details to his grave. And that's the thing about wilderness mysteries. Even when you solve the who, the how, and the why can stay buried under moss and time. The woods keep their secrets. Shenandoah National Park is still beautiful. People still camp there. The bridle trail still winds through the forest. The stream still flows near milepost 42. But if you hike there today, you might think about Julie and Lolly, 2 women who did everything right, who were experienced, prepared, and strong. Who brought a dog, who stayed near civilization, and it still wasn't enough. Because the scariest truth isn't that the wilderness is dangerous. It's that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the wilderness is another human being. And they don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like just another hiker on the trail. Summer 2011. The Appalachian Trail is alive with hikers. You've got the young 20-somethings trying to find themselves between college and the real world. You've got retirees finally living the dream they postponed for decades. And then you've got people like Scott Lilly, somewhere in between, walking not just to conquer miles, but to connect with something deeper. Scott was 30 years old. He was from South Bend, Indiana. His trail name was Stonewall, which he chose because of his fascination with Confederate General Thomas Stonewall Jackson and Civil War history. Scott wasn't out there to post Instagram photos or collect patches for his backpack. He was a pilgrim. He'd stop at battlefields along the way, read the plaques, stand where soldiers once stood, and try to understand what had happened on that ground more than a century ago. He was hiking southbound, Sobo, in trail lingo, which meant he'd started in Maryland in mid-June and was working his way down to Springer Mountain in Georgia. He wasn't an elite athlete crushing 30-mile days. He was a section hiker, moving at his own pace, carrying a blue or purple backpack, wearing these distinctive Walmart Ozark Trail hiking shoes, brown and orange, the kind you buy because they're cheap and functional, not because they're pretty. Scott was also working through some things. His family later said he was dealing with personal issues. The trail has a way of attracting people like that, people who need space, who need silence, who need to walk until their thoughts untangle. But here's the thing about the Appalachian Trail. It's a community. You're never truly alone. You see the same faces at shelters. You share food. You swap stories. Trail names become more real than birth names. It's supposed to be one of the safest long-distance hikes in the world because there are always people around, except when there aren't. Let me set the scene for you. The George Washington National Forest in Virginia. This isn't the gentle rolling hills part of the AT. This is dense, ancient Appalachian forest, the kind where the canopy is so thick that even at noon, the light comes down in dusty shafts. The undergrowth is a tangle of rhododendron and mountain laurel. Locals call them hells, because once you're in them, you can't see 2 feet in front of your face. The humidity in July is oppressive. Your clothes never fully dry. Your boots squish with every step. And the silence. God, the silence. You'd think a forest would be loud with birds and insects, but sometimes it just stops, and in that silence, every snapped twig, every rustle feels like it's right behind you. This is where Scott Lilly was hiking in late July 2011, and this is where he started to feel like he was being watched. Now, we don't know exactly when it started, but we know from conversations with his family that Scott's phone calls home began to change. At first, it was the usual stuff. "Hey Mom, I'm at this shelter. The weather's been rough. My feet are killing me." Normal hiker complaints. But then the tone shifted. He started talking about games people were playing on the trail. He mentioned feeling uncomfortable. He told his mother he felt like someone was following him, watching him. His family would later describe him as sounding paranoid, maybe even a little scared. Here's the question. Was Scott losing his grip on reality? Or was his gut screaming at him because something was genuinely wrong? Because here's what we know about intuition. It's your subconscious picking up on patterns before your conscious mind can articulate them. Maybe Scott kept seeing the same person at different shelters when the timing didn't make sense. Maybe someone was asking too many questions about his plans. Maybe he felt eyes on him in the woods when he thought he was alone. We'll never know. But what we do know is this. Scott Lilly was right to be afraid. July 31st, 2011. This is the last confirmed day anyone sees Scott alive. He climbs a mountain called the Priest. It's a beast of a climb, 63 feet, a lung burner even for experienced hikers. But Scott makes it. He's documented as being near the Cow Camp Gap shelter that evening. It's a classic AT shelter, 3 wooden walls, a roof, a dirt floor, and space for maybe 8 people to sleep shoulder to shoulder. Shelters are social hubs. Hikers gather there, share food, trade stories. Someone usually has a little portable speaker playing music. There's laughter. There's the smell of dehydrated meals rehydrating in Ziploc bags. But after July 31st, Scott doesn't show up at the next shelter, or the one after that. His mother is sending him Walmart gift cards so he can resupply in trail towns. He's supposed to call when he gets them. The calls stop coming. By mid-August, his family knows something is catastrophically wrong. They report him missing. The search begins. August 12, 2011, 12 days after Scott was last seen. A group of weekend hikers is exploring a side trail near Cow Camp Gap, an old, barely maintained trail called the Old Hotel Trail. It's the kind of trail that doesn't get a lot of traffic, the kind where the forest is starting to reclaim the path. They find a body. It's partially buried, covered with leaves and debris. It's in bad shape. Decomposition in the humid Virginia summer is fast and brutal, but it's clearly human. 4 days later, on August 16th, the body is positively identified as Scott Allen Lilly. And this is where the story stops making any sense. Let's talk about what was found and what wasn't. The medical examiner rules the death a homicide. Cause of death, asphyxia by suffocation. Let me pause on that. Suffocation, not a gunshot, not a stabbing, not blunt force trauma from a fall. Suffocation. That means someone got close enough to Scott Lilly to physically cut off his air for 3 to 5 minutes. That's how long it takes to suffocate someone. That's not a split-second act of violence. That's sustained. That's intimate. That's terrifying. And here's the other thing. Suffocation is quiet. A gunshot would echo through the mountains. A scream might alert other hikers. But suffocation? In the dense, muffling woods? No one would hear a thing. Now let's talk about what's missing. Scott's backpack, blue or purple, depending on who you ask, was never found. His hiking shoes, those distinctive brown and orange Walmart Ozark Trail shoes, gone. His tent, gone. A Nintendo game he carried, gone. His Appalachian Trail handbook, gone. Think about that for a second. Scott's body was found, but every single item he needed to survive on the trail was taken. Animals don't steal backpacks. Bears don't need hiking boots. Someone took his gear. Why? Was it a robbery? Maybe, but if you're robbing someone, you take their wallet, their cash. You don't take used hiking shoes and a beat-up backpack. Unless you need them. Unless you're someone living rough in the woods yourself. Or unless you're taking trophies. The FBI gets involved. In April 2012, they announce a $10,000 reward for information. They release the list of missing items. They do something else too, something unusual. They release 5 trail names they want to talk to: Mr. Coffee, White Wolf, Papa Smurf, Combat Gizmo, and Space Cadet. Now, trail names are sacred. They're your identity on the AT. The fact that the FBI is publicly asking about specific hikers means they think these people saw something. Or maybe Scott mentioned them in his calls home. Maybe these were the people playing the games he talked about. One by one, these hikers are tracked down and interviewed. Papa Smurf is cleared. He was in a different state. The others check out too. Dead ends. But here's what haunts investigators. Scott felt like he was being followed. And then he ended up dead, suffocated, his gear stolen, his body hidden just off a side trail in one of the most remote sections of the AT. Let's talk about theories. Theory 1, the local predator. There are rumors, unconfirmed but persistent, that certain sections of the AT near the George Washington National Forest attract drifters, squatters, people who live in the woods year-round. Not harmless hippies, dangerous people, people who see solo hikers as easy targets. Maybe Scott crossed paths with someone like that, someone who needed his gear, someone who saw him as a threat or an opportunity. Theory 2, the stalker. This is the one that keeps me up at night. Scott told his family he felt watched. What if he was right? What if someone had been following him for days, learning his rhythm, waiting for the right moment? The Cow Camp Gap area is remote. The Old Hotel Trail is barely used. It's the perfect place to make someone disappear. Theory 3, the thru hiker gone wrong. There's a dark side to trail culture that no one likes to talk about. Most thru hikers are wonderful people, but every year there are a few who are off. People who've been on the trail too long, who've lost their grip on social norms, who start to see other hikers as competition or enemies. Could Scott have had a confrontation with another hiker that escalated? Could someone have snapped? Here's what we know for sure. Scott Lilly went into the woods to find peace, to connect with history, to walk through the same forests where soldiers once marched, where battles were fought, where ghosts still linger in the morning mist. But instead of peace, he found a predator. And that predator is still out there. Because the case remains unsolved. No arrests, no confessions, just a $10,000 reward that's been sitting there for over a decade, waiting for someone to come forward. There's another disappearance in the same general area. A man named Chad Austin went missing near Panther Falls in the Jefferson National Forest years later. Some investigators think there might be a connection. Maybe there's someone operating in these woods, someone who knows the trails, who knows how to move unseen, who knows that if you bury a body just far enough off the main path, it might take weeks or months or years to find. And that's the nightmare, isn't it? The idea that the Appalachian Trail, this beloved, iconic communal ribbon of dirt, might be hunting grounds for someone who understands how to exploit its isolation. If you're out there hiking and you get that feeling, that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, that sense that you're being watched, don't ignore it. Scott Lilly felt it. He told his family. He was right. The woods are beautiful, they're healing, they're transformative, but they're not always safe. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing on the trail isn't a bear or a rattlesnake. It's another person. Someone who knows how to wait, how to watch, how to strike when you're alone, miles from help, surrounded by nothing but trees and silence. Scott Lilly went into the woods looking for history. Instead, he became part of it. And whoever killed him, they're still out there, still walking, still watching. Maybe they've moved on to another trail, another forest, another victim. Or maybe they're still in those Virginia woods, waiting for the next hiker to wander just a little too far off the beaten path. February 9th, 2004, New Hampshire. The White Mountains in winter are not like the White Mountains in summer. In summer, they're postcard perfect. Waterfalls, hiking trails, families taking photos at scenic overlooks. But in February is brutal. The temperature drops below freezing. The snowbanks along the roads are taller than a person. The trees are skeletal and black against the sky. And when the sun goes down, which happens early, around 5 p.m., the darkness is absolute. Route 112, also known as the Wild Amono-Osik Road, cuts through this landscape. It's a 2-lane road with sharp curves and no streetlights. If you break down out there at night, you are alone in a way that's hard to describe unless you've experienced it. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Hypothermia can set in within minutes if you're not prepared. And on this particular night, a 21-year-old woman named Maura Murray crashed her car on one of those sharp curves and then vanished into thin air. 20 years later, we still don't know what happened to her. Let me tell you about Maura Murray. She was a nursing student at UMass Amherst. She was also a former West Point cadet. She'd left the military academy after a year, but the point is, she wasn't some fragile, naive kid. She was disciplined. She was smart. She was a track star in high school, the kind of person who pushed through pain and didn't quit easily. But in the days leading up to February 9th, something was going wrong in Maura's life. She'd recently been in a car accident, crashed her father's car after a night out. There were questions about whether she'd been drinking. She'd also been caught using a stolen credit card number to order food. She was dealing with relationship drama with her boyfriend, Bill, who was stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. And she just had an emotional breakdown at work. She was working a security job at her dorm, and one night she just broke down crying. Her supervisor sent her home. So by early February 2004, Maura was under a lot of stress. And on February 9th, she did something that still baffles investigators. She packed up her dorm room. Not just for a weekend trip, she packed almost everything, as if she wasn't planning to come back. She emailed her professors and her work supervisor with a lie. There had been a death in the family, and she needed to be away for a week. There was no death. Her family was fine. Then, At 1 p.m., she called a number for condo rentals in Stowe, Vermont. The call lasted 5 minutes, but she didn't book anything. At 3:15 p.m., she withdrew $280 from an ATM, nearly all the money in her account. At 3:43 p.m., she went to a liquor store and bought a lot of alcohol, Kahlua, vodka, Baileys, and a box of Franzia wine. Enough booze for a party or a week of drinking alone. And then she got in her car, a black 1996 Saturn SL2, and drove north, into the White Mountains, into the winter wilderness. Now, here's the question that has driven people crazy for 2 decades. Why? If you're running away to start a new life, why withdraw only $280? That's not enough to get far. Why buy alcohol instead of, say, a bus ticket? Why lie about a family death instead of just saying you need a mental health break? And if you're planning to hurt yourself, which some people have theorized, why pack your entire dorm room? Why email professors about coming back in a week? Nothing about Maura's actions that day makes complete sense. It's like she was planning something, but even she didn't know what it was. 7:27 p.m. The crash. Maura is driving eastbound on Route 112 near Haverhill, New Hampshire. It's pitch black. The road is dry, but the shoulders are lined with massive snowbanks. She comes around a sharp curve. Locals call it the weathered barn curve, and she loses control. Her car spins out. It hits a snowbank on the side of the road. The front end is damaged. The windshield is cracked. The car is immobilized, half buried in snow. A woman named Faith Westman lives in a house right near the curve. She hears the crash and looks out her window. She sees the car. She sees the headlights. She calls 911 at 7:27 p.m. and reports the accident. She mentions seeing what looks like a man smoking a cigarette near the car. Though this detail is disputed, it might have been the red glow of a cell phone or a reflector. Another neighbor, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood, is driving home from his route. He sees the car and stops to help. And this is where the story gets strange. Butch gets out of his bus and approaches the car. There's a young woman standing near the vehicle, later identified as Maura. She appears shaken but uninjured. Butch asks if she's okay, if she needs help, if he should call the police. And Maura says no. She tells him she's already called AAA. She insists she doesn't need the police. She seems anxious, nervous, almost pleading with him not to call anyone. Now, let's pause here. This is a critical logic gap. Maura's cell phone records show no outgoing calls at that time, and even if she had tried to call AAA, there was no cell service in that area. So why did she lie to Butch Atwood? Why was she so desperate to avoid police involvement? The most common theory is that she was terrified of getting a DUI. She'd already had one car accident recently. Another one, especially if alcohol was involved, could ruin her life. So when Butch offered to call the cops, she panicked. Butch, being a decent human, says, okay. He drives about 100 yards down the road to his house and calls 911 anyway, because he's worried about her being stranded in the freezing cold. The call is logged at approximately 7:43 p.m. At 7:46 p.m., just 3 minutes later, a Haverhill police officer named Cecil Smith arrives at the scene. The car is there, the doors are locked, the driver's side airbag has deployed. Inside the car, police find an open container of alcohol, spilled or partially consumed, the bottles she'd bought earlier, her AOA card, some MapQuest directions, and a book called Not Without Peril, which is about people who died in the White Mountains. But Maura, she's gone. Let me emphasize the timeline here, because this is what makes the case so impossibly baffling. From the moment Butch Atwood drove away, approximately 7:40 p.m., to the moment the police arrived, 7:46 p.m., only 6 to 9 minutes elapsed. In those few minutes, in the freezing cold, in the pitch-black darkness, Maura Murray disappeared. She locked her car. She took some of the alcohol, not all of it, and she vanished. No one saw her walk down the road. No one saw her get into another vehicle. No one heard her scream or struggle. She was just gone. The next day, a massive search begins. Police, volunteers, search dogs, helicopters, they comb the area. And this is where things get even stranger. A police bloodhound is brought in to track Maura's scent. The dog is given a scent article. A pair of new leather gloves found in Maura's car. The dog picks up a trail leading east from the crash site down Route 112 along the shoulder of the road. The dog tracks the scent for about 100 yards, and then the scent just stops in the middle of the pavement, as if Maura simply ceased to exist at that spot. Now, there are two ways to interpret this. Interpretation 1. The scent trail is unreliable. The gloves were new and might not have carried much of Maura's scent. The dog might have been tracking the wrong thing. Interpretation 2. The scent trail is accurate, and if it's accurate, then it means Maura walked down the road for 100 yards and then got into a vehicle. Either she flagged down a passing car or someone was waiting for her. Let's talk about the theories because there are a lot of them. Theory 1. The opportunistic abduction. Maura, terrified of a DUI, started walking down the dark road to put distance between herself and the crash. A driver came along, saw a young woman alone in the cold, and offered her a ride. She got in, maybe gratefully, maybe reluctantly, and that driver turned out to be a predator. This theory is supported by the scent trail ending on the road. It's also supported by the fact that no trace of Maura has ever been found in the woods. If she died of exposure or injury in the forest, searchers would have found her body, her clothing, something. Theory 2. The tandem driver. Some people believe Maura wasn't alone. They think someone was following her in a second car, maybe a friend, maybe her boyfriend, maybe someone else. When she crashed, this person picked her up and they left together. This would explain why she was so insistent about not calling the police and why she disappeared so quickly. But if this is true, who was the tandem driver? And why haven't they come forward in 20 years? Theory 3. She ran into the woods and died. The simplest explanation, Maura, panicked and possibly intoxicated, ran into the woods to hide from the police. She got disoriented, succumbed to hypothermia, and died. Her body is somewhere in the vast, dense forest, hidden under decades of leaf litter and undergrowth. But here's the problem with this theory. The snow. If Maura had run into the woods, she would have left footprints. The snow was fresh and deep. Searchers looked for tracks and found none leading away from the road into the forest. So if she didn't go into the woods and the scent trail ended on the road, that leaves us with the inescapable conclusion. She got into a vehicle. Let's talk about the car itself, because there are some deeply weird details. First, there's the rag in the tailpipe. When police examined the Saturn, they found a white cloth rag stuffed into the exhaust pipe. Why would that be there? Maura's father later said he'd advised her to do this as a temporary fix for her car's smoking problem. The Saturn was running on 3 cylinders and coughing out smoke. Stuffing a rag in the tailpipe was supposed to reduce the visible smoke, but other people, including EMTs who examined the scene, found this suspicious. Some have theorized that the rag was placed there after the crash, possibly as a way to disable the car or as some kind of signal. Second, there's the alcohol. Maura bought a lot of booze that day. Some of it was found in the car, but not all of it. Did she take a bottle with her when she left? Was she drinking and driving? The spilled container suggests she might have been. And third, there's the question of what she was wearing. Maura was last seen in a dark jacket and jeans in February in New Hampshire at night. If she was walking down that road for any length of time, she would have been freezing. Here's what haunts me about the Maura Murray case. It's the silence. Not just the lack of answers, but the literal silence of that winter night. Route 112 is not a busy road. After dark, you might see 1 or 2 cars every 10 minutes. The houses are spread out. The woods are deep and quiet. If something happened to Maura on that road, if someone grabbed her, if she screamed, there was no one close enough to hear. And that's the nightmare, isn't it? The idea that in the 21st century, in the internet age, in a country where we're all connected and surveilled and tracked, a person can still vanish completely. Maura Murray became the first great internet mystery. Online sleuths have dissected every detail of her case. Reddit threads stretch for thousands of comments. Podcasts have dedicated entire seasons to her disappearance. Psychics, investigators, armchair detectives, everyone has a theory. But 20 years later, we have nothing concrete, no body, no confession, no breakthrough, just a locked car on a dark road, and a young woman who walked into the night and never came back. So what happened to Maura Murray? I don't know. And the maddening truth is, we might never know. But here's what I think. She got into a car. Whether it was a stranger who offered help or someone she knew, she got into a vehicle and left that scene. And whoever was driving that car knows exactly what happened to Maura Murray. They know where she is. They've known for 20 years, and they've never said a word. November 15th, 2001, Pinkham Notch, New Hampshire. If you've ever hiked in the White Mountains, you know this place. It's the beating heart of New Hampshire hiking culture. There's a massive AMC lodge, the Joe Dodge Lodge, with hot meals, gear shops, and bunks for overnight hikers. There's a visitor center that's always buzzing with families studying trail maps. The parking lots are huge and almost always full. In the summer, you can barely find a spot. Even in November, even with the cold setting in, there are cars everywhere. This is not some remote backcountry trailhead where you're the only human for miles. This is the Times Square of the White Mountains. This is where people go when they want the wilderness experience, but also want to know that civilization, hot coffee, first aid, other people, is just a few hundred yards away. And on November 15th, 2001, a 52-year-old woman named Louise Chaput was brutally murdered here. Not deep in the woods after days of solo backpacking, not on some forgotten trail miles from the nearest road, right here, practically within sight of the parking lot, on a busy holiday weekend. And nobody saw a thing. Let me tell you about Louise Chaput. She was a psychologist from Sherbrooke, Quebec, about 2 hours north of the border. She specialized in family counseling, but she also worked with prison inmates, which meant she had spent years studying the human mind at its most broken and dangerous. She understood violence, she understood manipulation, she understood predators. Louise was also an experienced hiker. She'd summited Mount Washington before, the tallest, most dangerous peak in the Northeast, the mountain where the weather can kill you in any season. So when I say she wasn't a naive tourist stumbling around in flip-flops, I mean it. She knew what she was doing out there. November 15th was supposed to be a simple day. Louise had driven down from Quebec, crossed the border at Norton, Vermont around 11:45 a.m. She stopped at a Pick-Quick convenience store in Colebrook, New Hampshire. The receipt was later found in her car, time-stamped 12:50 p.m. She was heading to Pinkham Notch to meet some friends later in the weekend, and she'd made a reservation at the Joe Dodge Lodge. But first, she wanted to stretch her legs, take a short hike, clear her head, enjoy the crisp November air before the weekend festivities began. Around 3 p.m., she arrived at the lodge. She checked in with a clerk and asked for a recommendation for a short hike. Nothing strenuous, just a quick walk to take in the scenery before it got dark. Now, this is important. In November in New Hampshire, the sun sets around 4:30 p.m. So Louise had maybe 90 minutes of daylight left. The clerk suggested the Lost Pond Trail, which is right across the street from the visitor center. It's an easy, popular trail. Families hike it. It's basically a nature walk. Louise thanked the clerk, walked back to her car, a silver Ford Focus, and drove a short distance to the trailhead parking area. She geared up, black fleece pants, a red nylon jacket, white Reebok sneakers. Not hardcore alpine gear, because she wasn't planning a hardcore alpine adventure. Just a walk in the woods. She locked her car and headed into the trees. She never came back. Let's talk about the timeline, because this is where the horror really sets in. Louise was supposed to check into the Joe Dodge Lodge that evening. She had a reservation. When she didn't show up, the staff assumed she'd changed her plans or was running late. It happens all the time. People get caught up in the beauty of the mountains, lose track of time, decide to camp somewhere else. But by November 19th, 4 days later, Louise hadn't shown up for work back in Quebec. Her family hadn't heard from her. They reported her missing. On November 20th, police located her silver Ford Focus, still parked at the Diratissima trailhead near Lost Pond. The car was locked. Her belongings were inside, except for the items she'd taken on the hike. A massive search operation began. Volunteers, park rangers, search and rescue teams, they spread out across the trails calling her name, looking for any sign of her. Was she injured? Had she gotten lost and succumbed to hypothermia during the cold November nights? Had she fallen and broken a leg, unable to move? The search went on for days. And then, on November 22nd, Thanksgiving Day, they found her. Her body was approximately 200 feet off the Glen Boulder Trail. Not Lost Pond, where she'd planned to hike, but Glen Boulder, a more rugged trail that branches off nearby. And it wasn't hypothermia. It wasn't a fall. It wasn't an accident. Louise Chaput had been stabbed multiple times. This was a homicide. Now, let's stop and think about this for a second. Louise was murdered in one of the busiest, most heavily trafficked hiking areas in New England, on a holiday weekend, in the middle of the day. And nobody heard a scream. Nobody saw a struggle. Nobody noticed a man with blood on his clothes walking out of the woods. How is that possible? The autopsy confirmed multiple stab wounds. Stabbing is an up-close, personal, violent method of killing. It requires the attacker to be within arm's reach of the victim. It's messy. It's loud. Not just the victim's screams, but the sounds of the struggle, the thrashing, the desperate fight for survival. And Louise would have fought. She was 52, but she was fit. She was experienced. She knew these woods. And as a psychologist who worked with violent offenders, she understood danger. She wasn't going to go quietly. So what happened? Theory 1. The ambush. Maybe the killer was already in the woods, hiding, waiting. Maybe he spotted Louise hiking alone and followed her. When she stopped to take in the view or adjust her pack, he struck. Fast, overwhelming force before she could scream. He stabbed her, left her body in the underbrush, and then walked calmly back to the parking lot and drove away. The problem with this theory? It was 3 p.m. The trails were busy. Hikers pass each other constantly, especially on popular trails near the visitor center. For someone to follow Louise, attack her, and leave without being seen by anyone else requires almost impossible luck. Or incredible planning. Theory 2. The encounter. Maybe Louise crossed paths with someone on the trail, another hiker, someone she exchanged pleasantries with, maybe even someone who asked for help or directions. And that person, for reasons we'll never fully understand, decided to kill her. This is the theory that keeps investigators up at night, because it means the killer wasn't a lurking monster in the shadows. He was just another person on the trail. Maybe he even nodded to other hikers as he walked back to his car afterward. Maybe he stopped at the visitor center for a coffee. Maybe he blended in so perfectly that no one suspected a thing. Theory 3. The transient. There's a darker side to the hiking world that people don't like to talk about. Most thru hikers and outdoor enthusiasts are wonderful, respectful people. But occasionally, someone is living rough in the woods, not by choice, but because they're running from something. Maybe they're unstable. Maybe they're dangerous. Could Louise have stumbled across someone's illegal camp? Someone who panicked or saw her as a threat? Someone who killed her to protect their hiding spot? Let's talk about what's missing, because this is where the case gets even stranger. Louise's car keys were never found, but her car was still in the parking lot, locked. Her blue Conic brand sleeping bag, gone. Her blue backpack with a Canadian flag patch, gone. A pendant with an S design, gone. So the killer took specific items. The sleeping bag and backpack suggest he needed gear, which supports the transient living in the woods theory. But why take the car keys if you're not taking the car? Keys are evidence. They link you to the victim. A smart killer would toss them in the bushes, not carry them away. Unless he wasn't smart. Unless he was panicked and just grabbed everything he could and ran. Here's the thing that makes this case so deeply unsettling. Louise Chaput was murdered in broad daylight on a holiday weekend in one of the most visited hiking areas in the Northeast, and the killer walked away clean. No witnesses, no DNA match, no arrests. For over 20 years, investigators have chased leads. They've interviewed hundreds of people. They've followed tips. They've used every tool available to modern forensics, and they've come up with nothing. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit still lists Louise Chaput's murder as an active investigation. They release public appeals every few years, hoping someone will remember something. A strange encounter on the trail, a person who seemed off, a car parked suspiciously near the trailhead. But so far, silence. But let's talk about the psychology for a moment because it's important. Louise was a trained psychologist. She spent her career understanding why people do the things they do. She worked with prisoners, violent offenders, people who had committed terrible crimes. She knew how to read body language. She knew the warning signs of danger. And yet somehow she crossed paths with someone whose mind was so fractured, so unpredictable, that even her professional training couldn't save her. There's a tragic irony in that. She spent her life trying to understand the darkness in the human psyche. And in the end, that darkness found her on a sunny afternoon in the mountains. Now, here's the question that haunts me. Where is the killer now? Because here's the reality. He's still out there. He could be anywhere. He could be living a normal life, a job, a family, a house in the suburbs. Maybe he tells himself it was a one-time thing, a moment of madness that he'll never repeat. Or maybe he's done it again. Maybe there are other victims we don't know about, other hikers who disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances in other parks, other states, other countries. Or maybe he's dead. Maybe he was a transient living rough in the woods and he succumbed to exposure or illness years ago, taking the truth with him. We'll probably never know. Here's what keeps me awake when I think about the Louise Chaput case. It's not the brutality of the murder. As horrific as that is, it's the silence. The fact that this happened in plain sight or near enough, and nobody saw, nobody heard, nobody stopped it. Pinkham Notch is a place where you can park your car, hike for 20 minutes, and still be within shouting distance of dozens of people. It's a place where you feel safe because you're surrounded by other outdoor enthusiasts, park rangers, lodge staff. But Louise Chaput learned the hard way that safety is an illusion. Because in the woods, even the popular woods, even the safe woods, you can still be alone when it matters most. The trees block the line of sight, the wind drowns out the screams, and the person you pass on the trail, the one who smiles and says, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" might be the last person you ever see. If you're planning to hike, especially solo, here's what I want you to remember from this case. Tell someone where you're going. Be specific. Not the White Mountains, but Glen Boulder Trail, Pinkham Notch, planning to be back by 5 p.m. Trust your gut. If someone on the trail makes you uncomfortable, don't be polite. Turn around. Head back to the parking lot. Your safety matters more than social etiquette, and understand that even in the busiest, most popular hiking areas, you are not guaranteed witnesses. You are not guaranteed help. Louise Chaput did everything right. She hiked in a busy area. She told people where she was going. She had the experience and the knowledge to stay safe. And it still wasn't enough, because sometimes the wilderness isn't the danger. It's the person walking toward you on the trail, hands in their pockets, smiling like they belong there. And by the time you realize they don't, it's already too late. June 14th, 1969, Father's Day weekend. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is alive with families. It's peak season. The rhododendrons are blooming, the weather is warm, and the trails are packed with people celebrating the holiday. The Smokies are the most visited national park in America, and for good reason. The mountains roll on forever, covered in a blue haze that gives them their name. There are waterfalls, wildflowers, and wildlife. It feels safe. It feels magical. And on this particular sunny afternoon, a family is camping at a place called Spence Field. Spence Field is not deep backcountry. It's a grassy bald, a wide open meadow at the top of a ridge. You can see for hundreds of yards in every direction. The Appalachian Trail runs right through it. It's the kind of place where kids can run and play while parents relax on picnic blankets, keeping an easy eye on them. The Martin family, Bill and Barbara, along with their two sons, Dennis and Douglas, had driven down from Tennessee. They were meeting up with Barbara's father, Clyde, and another family, the Hills, who had 3 children. So there were multiple adults, multiple kids, and an entire open field to play in. It should have been the safest place in the world. And then, in less time than it takes to tie your shoe, 6-year-old Dennis Martin vanished and he was never seen again. Let me tell you about Dennis. He was 6 years old, just a few weeks shy of his 7th birthday. He had dark hair, a bright smile, and he was wearing a red t-shirt and green shorts. The red shirt is important because it should have made him incredibly visible against the green foliage of the mountains. Dennis wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't the kind of kid who wandered off. He was playing with his older brother Douglas, who was 10, and 2 of the hill boys. They were doing what kids do, running around, laughing, having fun in the open field. And then they decided to pull a prank. It was harmless, the kind of thing kids have done forever. The plan was simple. The 4 boys would split up, hide behind different bushes at the edge of the field, and then jump out to scare the adults. Classic kid logic, hilarious to them, mildly annoying to the parents, so they scattered. Now, here's the timeline. And I need you to understand just how impossibly tight this window is. It's approximately 4:30 p.m. The boys split up and crouch behind bushes at the edge of Spence Field. The adults are maybe 50 yards away, sitting together, chatting, enjoying the afternoon. The first 3 boys, Douglas and the 2 hill kids, jump out from their hiding spots. Boo! They laugh. The adults smile and play along. They wait for Dennis to jump out. He doesn't. They call his name. Dennis, come on, buddy, you can come out now. Nothing. Bill Martin, Dennis's father, gets up and walks over to the area where Dennis was supposed to be hiding. He's not annoyed yet. He's thinking Dennis is just playing the prank a little longer, trying to really get them. Bill reaches the bush. It's empty. He looks around. The field is open. You can see for hundreds of feet. There are other families nearby, other hikers on the trail, but Dennis is nowhere. Bill calls his name louder. Dennis! Dennis! The other adults join in. They spread out, calling, searching. The panic starts to set in. Because here's the thing. From the moment the boys split up to the moment Bill Martin realized Dennis was gone, less than 5 minutes had passed. 5 minutes. How does a 6-year-old boy wearing a bright red shirt disappear from an open field in 5 minutes? By 5 p.m., the entire campground is searching. Other families, other hikers, everyone is calling Dennis's name. Bill and Clyde are running down trails, checking behind trees, looking over ledges. They're frantic. The sun is still up, but it's starting to dip toward the horizon. And then, as if the universe is conspiring against them, the weather turns. Around 6 p.m., a massive storm system moves in. We're not talking about a light drizzle. This is a torrential biblical downpour. In a matter of hours, nearly 3 inches of rain fall on the Smoky Mountains. The temperature drops. The creeks swell into raging torrents. The trails turn to mud. And every single footprint, every scent trail, every tiny clue that might have led searchers to Dennis is washed away. By the next morning, this has become a full-scale emergency. Park rangers, volunteers, local law enforcement, they all converge on Spence Field. And then the search grows even bigger. The National Guard is called in. The Green Berets, elite soldiers from Fort Bragg, deploy to assist. Helicopters circle overhead. Bloodhounds are brought in to track scent. At its peak, over 400 searchers are combing the mountains. This becomes the largest search operation in the history of the National Park Service. They search for weeks. They crawl through rhododendron thickets so dense you can't see your hand in front of your face. They check every cave, every drainage, every ridge. They call his name until their voices go hoarse, and they find nothing. No red shirt, no little green shorts, no footprints, no sign that Dennis Martin was ever there. Now, here's where the story takes a turn into something darker, something that has fueled speculation and folklore for over 50 years. About 5 to 7 miles from Spence Field, there was another family hiking that afternoon. A man named Harold Key, along with his family, was on a trail near a place called Rowan's Creek, and Harold Key saw something. First, he heard it. He later described it as an enormous, sickening scream coming from the woods. It wasn't an animal sound. It wasn't a human sound exactly either. It was something in between, something wrong. And then he saw movement. Harold Key described seeing a figure running through the trees. He said it looked like a man, but not a normal hiker. He used words like rough, unkempt, shaggy. Some reports say he described it as a wild man. Others say he thought it might have been someone covered in hair or fur, moving fast and low through the undergrowth. And here's the detail that has haunted this case ever since. Harold Key said the figure appeared to be carrying something over its shoulder, something that might have been wrapped in red fabric. Let's pause here and talk about what this means. Park rangers initially dismissed Harold Key's account. Why? Because the distance between Spencefield and Rowan's Creek is 5 to 7 miles, depending on the route. And the timeline didn't seem to make sense. How could Dennis have been carried that far in such a short amount of time? But if you look at a topographic map, there's a narrow, steep drainage that connects the two areas. Someone moving fast, someone who knew the terrain, could theoretically cover that distance in a couple of hours. Not a casual hiker, not a 6-year-old boy, but someone strong, determined, and desperate? Maybe. So the question becomes, what did Harold Key see? Option 1, a bear. The most rational explanation. Bears are common in the Smokies. They can run fast. They sometimes carry prey. But Harold Key was an experienced outdoorsman. He knew what a bear looked like. And he didn't describe a bear. He described something humanoid. Option 2, a feral human. This is where the folklore comes in. The Appalachian Mountains have a long history of stories about wild men, people who have lived in the woods for so long they've become something other than civilized, hermits, outcasts, or, in the darkest version of the legend, feral children who were abandoned or lost and somehow survived, becoming quasi-animalistic. Is it possible someone living in the mountains saw Dennis, grabbed him, and ran? It sounds like something out of a horror movie, but people have lived off the grid in these mountains for centuries. Option 3, a kidnapper. The simplest and most terrifying explanation. Someone was at Spencefield that day, someone who saw an opportunity when Dennis separated from the group, someone who grabbed him, carried him away, and disappeared into the wilderness before anyone realized what had happened. The FBI got involved. They investigated Harold Key's account. They kept the details quiet for years. Some say to avoid public panic, others say because they didn't want to compromise the investigation. And here's the thing. To this day, portions of the FBI's files on Dennis Martin remain redacted or classified. Why? What are they hiding? Or are they simply protecting the dignity of a family that has suffered enough? Let's talk about the aftermath, because this case changed everything. The search for Dennis Martin went on for weeks. The forest was picked apart. Searchers crawled on their hands and knees through the underbrush. They used dogs, helicopters, and trained military personnel. And they found nothing. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not a bone. It's as if Dennis Martin was erased from existence. Years later, there were scattered reports. A hiker claimed to have found a child's shoe in the area. A ginseng hunter said he discovered a small skeleton in the 1980s. But when investigators returned to check, nothing could be verified. The leads evaporated like morning fog. Dennis's father, Bill Martin, spent the rest of his life haunted by that day. He returned to the Smokies repeatedly, searching, hoping. He never got closure. He died not knowing what happened to his son. So what do I think happened to Dennis Martin? Honestly, I don't know. But here's what I find most disturbing. The speed. Dennis vanished in less time than it takes to walk across a parking lot. He was in a wide open field, surrounded by family on a sunny afternoon, with dozens of other people nearby. And he was just gone. If he wandered off on his own, searchers would have found him. A 6-year-old can't cover that much ground that fast, and they would have found his body, his clothing, something. If an animal took him, there would have been signs of a struggle. Blood, torn fabric, screams that the adults would have heard. But there was nothing. Which leaves the possibility that someone took him. Fast, quietly, efficiently. And if that's true, then Harold Key's sighting becomes a lot more important. Because if he really did see a man carrying something red, then we're not talking about a tragic accident or a child lost in the woods. We're talking about an abduction. A predator who knew the mountains, who knew how to move fast and unseen, and who saw an opportunity and took it. The Great Smoky Mountains are beautiful. Millions of people visit every year. Families hike the trails, camp in the fields, and make memories. But somewhere in those mountains, buried under 50 years of leaves and moss and silence, is the answer to what happened to Dennis Martin. Maybe it's as simple as a child who wandered into the woods and succumbed to the elements, or maybe it's something darker, something that explains the scream Harold Key heard, something that explains the figure moving through the trees with a bundle of red cloth. We'll probably never know. But the next time you're hiking in a national park and you see an open field where kids are playing, remember Dennis Martin. Remember that even in the safest looking places, in broad daylight surrounded by people, a child can vanish in seconds. And sometimes, they never come back. November 9th, 1891. Rural Virginia, the Blue Ridge Mountains. If you've ever driven through the Shenandoah Valley in autumn, you know how beautiful it is. The mountains roll on forever, covered in hardwood forests that turn gold and crimson when the frost comes. But in 1891, this wasn't a scenic tourist destination with overlooks and visitor centers. This was wilderness. This was working country. This was a place where families scratched out a living on rocky soil, where winters were brutal, and where the woods were dark, deep, and dangerous. Near the base of a mountain called Bluff Mountain, some old-timers called it Tower Mountain, there was a one-room schoolhouse, the Tower Hill Schoolhouse. It was a simple wooden structure where local children, ranging from 6 years old to teenagers, gathered for lessons in reading, arithmetic, and scripture. And on the morning of November 9th, 1891, a little boy named Oddie Klein Powell arrived at school with his older siblings. Oddie was 4 years old, not quite 5. He was small for his age, so small that everyone called him Little Oddie. He had dark hair, a shy smile, and he struggled to keep up with the older kids. He wasn't supposed to be gathering firewood with the big boys, but he wanted to help. He wanted to be useful. So when the teacher sent the children outside to collect sticks for the schoolhouse stove, Oddie followed along, his little arms struggling to carry even a few pieces of wood. And then, in the chaos of children scattering into the tree line, laughing and playing, Oddie Klein Powell disappeared. By nightfall, the temperature had dropped below freezing. A cold rain began to fall, turning to sleet, and somewhere in those dark, endless woods, a 4-year-old boy was alone. He would not be found for 5 months, and when they finally discovered his body, it was in a place that shouldn't have been possible. Let me paint the picture of what Tower Hill looked like in 1891. There were no cars, no phones, no electric lights. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of the forest, surrounded by fields and scattered farms. The nearest town was miles away on horseback. When darkness fell, it was absolute. No streetlights, no flashlights, just the moon if you were lucky, and the distant glow of oil lamps in cabin windows. Bluff Mountain loomed in the background, rising over 3,300 feet. The slopes were covered in old-growth timber, thick stands of oak, hickory, and pine. There were no trails, no blazes, no established paths, just steep, rocky terrain, tangled undergrowth, and ravines that could swallow a person whole. And Oddie Klein Powell was 4 years old. He weighed maybe 40 pounds. He was wearing simple clothing, cotton or homespun wool pants, a shirt, maybe a light jacket. He had no food, no water, no survival gear. He was a toddler who'd been sent outside to pick up sticks. The teacher realized Oddie was missing around mid-afternoon. At first, she wasn't panicked. Kids wander off. Kids get distracted. But when the other children came back and Oddie didn't, she started calling his name. Nothing. The older boys went back into the woods, searching, calling. Still nothing. By late afternoon, the community was alerted. Farmers dropped their tools. Neighbors saddled horses. They formed search parties and spread out into the forest, shouting Oddie's name until their voices echoed off the mountain slopes. But the weather was turning. That evening, the cold front moved in. The temperature plummeted. Freezing rain began to fall, soaking through clothes, chilling searchers to the bone. And somewhere out there, a 4-year-old boy was alone in the dark. The search went on for days, then weeks, then months. Searchers combed every inch of the woods near the schoolhouse. They checked under bushes, in hollows, along creek beds. They looked for signs, broken branches, footprints, scraps of clothing. They expected to find him close by, maybe huddled under a log, maybe dead from exposure within the first night or two. But they found nothing. As winter deepened, snow covered the mountain. The trails became impassable. The search had to be called off. Audie's family held a funeral without a body. They prayed, they grieved. They assumed their little boy had been taken by wild animals, bears maybe, or wildcats, or that he'd fallen into a ravine and was buried under snow and ice. The community mourned. And they moved on. April 5th, 1892, spring. The snow had melted, the woods were coming back to life, and a hunter, or maybe a searcher who'd never given up, was climbing the slopes of Bluff Mountain. He reached the summit, the very top, the absolute peak of the mountain. And there, just a few feet down from the highest point, he found the body of Audie Klein Powell. Now, let's stop and think about this. The schoolhouse where Audie disappeared was at the base of Bluff Mountain, roughly 1,800 feet in elevation. The summit of Bluff Mountain is 372 feet. The distance between the 2 points, not as the crow flies, but as a person would have to walk. Climbing over ridges and navigating the terrain was approximately 7 miles. 7 miles, uphill, through dense untrailed forest, in freezing rain, in the dark, by a 4-year-old boy. Let me put this in perspective. A healthy adult hiker, in good weather, on a maintained trail, can cover 7 miles in about 3 to 4 hours. That's someone with long legs, good boots, a map, and the physical conditioning to handle steep climbs. Audie Klein Powell was 4 years old. His legs were maybe 2 feet long. He had no trail to follow, no flashlight to see by, no food or water. He was wearing inadequate clothing in freezing conditions, and he was climbing uphill the entire way. Physiologically, this shouldn't be possible. A 4-year-old child doesn't have the lung capacity, the muscular endurance, or the caloric reserves to hike 7 miles uphill, especially not in freezing rain, especially not in the dark. And yet, the body was found at the summit. The doctor who examined the remains concluded that Audie had died from exposure, hypothermia, but the position of the body suggested he had laid down to rest, as if he'd simply been too exhausted to go on. There was no sign of injury, no evidence of a fall or an animal attack. He had walked there, and then he had died. So how did he get there? That's the question that has haunted this mountain for over 130 years. Theory 1. Adrenaline and panic. When a child gets lost, fear can do strange things. The human body, even a small one, is capable of extraordinary feats under extreme stress. Maybe Audie, terrified and disoriented, just kept walking. Maybe he thought if he climbed high enough, he'd see the schoolhouse. Maybe he was following the slope, always going upward, because down felt too dark and enclosed. But here's the problem. Panic usually makes people move erratically. Lost children typically ring. They walk in circles. They don't maintain a straight vector for 7 miles. They don't summit mountains. Theory 2. He was following something. This is where the folklore comes in. Local legend says Audie was led to the summit. Some say he was following a spirit, what Appalachian folks call a hant. Others say he might have been following an animal, a deer, maybe, or even a large bird that he mistook for something else in his confused hypothermic state. There are stories, whispers really, that suggest Audie might have been lured by something. Something that wanted him on that mountain. I know how that sounds. But remember, this was 1891. The Appalachian Mountains were a place of deep superstition. Families told stories of wampus cats, of witches in the hollows, of children stolen by fairies. And when a tragedy like this happens, a tragedy that defies all logic, people reach for explanations that make sense within their worldview. Theory 3. Someone took him. This is the darkest possibility. Maybe Audie didn't walk to that summit alone. Maybe someone, a drifter, a stranger, someone passing through, found him in the woods and carried him up the mountain. Maybe they intended to help but got lost themselves. Or maybe they had darker intentions. But if that's true, why leave the body at the summit? Why not hide it or take it farther away? And why were there no reports of a stranger in the area? Here's what we know for certain. Audie Klein Powell's body was found at the summit of Bluff Mountain, 7 miles from where he disappeared. A stone monument stands there today, placed by the community as a memorial. It reads, "This is the exact spot little Audie Klein Powell's body was found April 5, 1891, after straying from Tower Hill Schoolhouse Noverter 9, a distance of 7 miles, age 4 years, 11 months. The Appalachian Trail now runs near that spot. Modern hikers pass the monument all the time, and some of them report feeling something. A sadness, a weight in the air, a sense that they're not alone. Some say they've seen a small figure in the trees, just for a second, just out of the corner of their eye. A little boy in old-fashioned clothes walking through the forest, always heading uphill. Is it Audie? Still searching for home? Still trying to find his way back to the schoolhouse? Or is it just the wind, the shadows, and the power of a story that refuses to die? I've thought about this case a lot, and here's what haunts me. The physical evidence says Audie walked to that summit. His body was found there. The doctor confirmed he died of exposure. There's no evidence of foul play. But common sense, biology, physics, basic human physiology, says he couldn't have made that journey. A 4-year-old boy cannot hike 7 miles uphill in freezing rain, in the dark, without food or water, and reach the absolute peak of a mountain before succumbing to exhaustion. It's impossible. And yet, it happened. Maybe Audie was driven by something we don't understand. Maybe fear and adrenaline pushed his tiny body beyond its limits. Maybe he really was following something, an animal, a light, a voice calling to him from the summit. Or maybe the mountain itself wanted him there. Maybe there's something about Bluff Mountain that draws the lost and the broken to its peak, like moths to a flame. I don't know. What I do know is that on a cold November night in 1891, a little boy named Audie Klein Powell walked into the woods to gather firewood and ended up touching the sky. And when the spring thaw came, they found him at the top of the world, curled up as if he were sleeping, just a few feet from the summit. The monument is still there. If you hike the Appalachian Trail through Virginia, you'll pass it. Take a moment, read the inscription, and think about the impossible journey of a 4-year-old boy who climbed a mountain in the dark and never came home. The woods are full of mysteries, but some mysteries are just too strange, too impossible, to ever fully understand. And maybe that's the point. Maybe some stories aren't meant to be solved. Maybe they're just meant to remind us that the wilderness is bigger, darker, and stranger than we'll ever truly know. October 8, 1976. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Clingman's Dome. If you've ever been to the Smokies, you know Clingman's Dome. It's the highest point in the park, set 4 feet above sea level. There's a massive observation tower that looks like something out of a sci-fi movie, a huge paved parking lot, and on any given day, hundreds of tourists milling around, taking photos, eating snacks, complaining about the steep walk to the tower. This is not remote backcountry. This is the most visited national park in America, and Clingman's Dome is one of its crown jewels. It's crowded, it's managed, it's safe. And on October 8, 1976, a 16-year-old girl named Trenny Gibson vanished from the middle of a high school field trip. She was surrounded by 40 classmates and several teachers. She was hiking on a well-marked, heavily trafficked trail. She was seen by multiple people just minutes before she disappeared, and then she turned a corner on the trail, and she was gone. No scream, no struggle, no sound, just gone. Nearly 50 years later, no one knows what happened to her. Let me tell you about Trenny Gibson. Her full name was Trenny Lynn Gibson, though some records refer to her as Teresa. She was 16 years old, a student at Bearden High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was small, 5'3", about 115 pounds, with long brown hair and green eyes. By all accounts, Trenny was a quiet kid, not the loudest voice in the room, not the class clown or the star athlete, just a normal teenager on a school field trip, excited to be out of the classroom on a beautiful fall day. October 8, 1976, was a Friday. The school had organized a field trip to the Smokies, 40 students and a handful of teachers. The plan was simple. Drive to Clingman's Dome, hike down to Andrews Bald, a scenic grassy meadow about 1.8 miles from the parking area, have lunch, enjoy the views, and hike back. Easy, safe, educational. The weather was perfect. Cool, crisp autumn air. The leaves were turning. The trails were in good condition. This was the kind of field trip that's supposed to be a highlight of your high school experience. Fresh air, friends, a break from algebra class. And for most of those 40 students, it was. But for Trenny Gibson, it was the last day of her life. At least, that's what investigators believe. Let's walk through the timeline, because this is where the case becomes impossible to understand. The group arrives at Clingman's Dome around midday. They gather at the parking lot, teachers do a head count, and they set off down the Forney Ridge Trail toward Andrews Bald. Now, this trail is not a narrow, overgrown path. It's a wide, well-maintained trail. In some sections, you could walk 3 people side by side. The trees create a tunnel of green, but the trail itself is clear. There are blazes, there are signs. You'd have to actively try to get lost. The group of 40 students naturally spreads out as they hike. Some kids are fast and eager, practically running down the trail. Others are slower, chatting with friends, stopping to look at mushrooms or take photos. This is normal. Teachers aren't worried. Everyone's on the same trail, heading to the same destination. Trenny is somewhere in the middle of the pack. She's not leading the charge, but she's not lagging behind either. She's seen walking with different small groups of friends throughout the hike. She seems fine. Maybe a little quiet, but that's just Trenny. They reach Andrews Bald. It's beautiful, a wide-open grassy area with panoramic views of the mountains. The students spread out, eat lunch, relax. Some play frisbee, some just sit and enjoy the view. After an hour or so, the teachers announce it's time to head back. The group reassembles and starts the return hike to the parking lot. And this is where everything goes wrong. The hike back is uphill, so it's slower. The group spreads out again. Trenny is walking with a small cluster of friends. But at some point, no one can say exactly when, she drifts to the back of that cluster. Maybe she's tired, maybe she stops to tie her shoe or catch her breath. The trail has a sharp bend, a switchback, or a curve where the path disappears around a rocky outcrop or dense vegetation. Multiple students later report seeing Trenny walking alone just before that bend. She's maybe 50 yards behind them. They turn the corner. They keep walking. They assume she's right behind them, but when they glance back a minute or two later, she's not there. At first, no one panics. Maybe she stopped to use the bathroom. Maybe she's just walking really slowly. The group keeps moving, assuming she'll catch up. They reach the parking lot. Teachers do a head count. Trenny isn't there. They wait. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They start calling her name. Some students jog back down the trail, calling for her. Nothing. By late afternoon, park rangers are notified. The field trip has turned into a search and rescue operation. Now, let's pause and think about the logistics of this. Trenny Gibson was hiking on a well-marked trail with 40 other people. She was last seen by her classmates less than a mile from the parking lot. The timeline between I see Trenny and where's Trenny is maybe 5 minutes, 10 at the absolute most. In those 5 to 10 minutes, Trenny Gibson ceased to exist. She didn't wander off the trail into the woods, because if she had, the students behind her would have seen her leave the path. She didn't run ahead, because the students in front of her would have seen her pass them. She didn't have a medical emergency and collapse on the trail, because searchers walked that exact path within an hour and found nothing. So where did she go? The search begins immediately. Park rangers, teachers, students, everyone is combing the area, shouting Trenny's name. As darkness falls, the temperature drops. The search becomes more urgent. Over the next several days, the search expands. Hundreds of volunteers, helicopters, bloodhounds. The weather turns bad. Freezing rain, heavy fog, near zero temperatures at night. If Trenny is out there, hurt or lost, her chances of survival are dropping by the hour. And then the tracking dogs do something strange. The handlers bring in specially trained bloodhounds and give them a scent article, something with Trenny's scent on it. The dogs pick up the trail immediately. They follow her scent from the parking lot, down the trail, toward the area where she was last seen. And then, at a specific point on the trail, near a switchback, near a distinctive rock or tree, the scent just stops. Not, the dog lost the scent because it rained. Not, the trail splits and we're not sure which way she went. The scent ends, abruptly, as if Trenny Gibson simply stopped existing at that exact spot. The handlers are baffled. Dogs don't just lose a scent like that unless something disrupted it: heavy rain, a river crossing, or the person getting into a vehicle. But there was no vehicle access on that trail. And while the weather did turn bad, the dogs were tracking within the first 24 hours before the worst of the rain hit. So why did the scent stop? Let's talk about the theories, because this case has haunted investigators and armchair detectives for decades. Theory 1. She fell. The simplest explanation. Maybe Trenny stepped off the trail to pee, lost her footing, and fell into a ravine or a hidden crevice. The terrain around Clingman's Dome is deceptive. What looks like solid ground can be a moss-covered sinkhole. The rhododendron thickets are so dense that a body could be 10 feet from the trail and remain undiscovered for years. But here's the problem. Searchers combed that area for weeks. They used dogs, helicopters with thermal imaging, and ground teams crawling through the underbrush on their hands and knees. If Trenny had fallen, they should have found her body, her clothing, or at least some sign of her. Theory 2. She was abducted. This is where the case takes a darker turn. What if someone was on that trail? Not a student, not a teacher, but someone else. A predator who saw an opportunity when Trenny drifted away from her group. Someone who grabbed her, pulled her off the trail, and silenced her before she could scream. But again, the logistics don't make sense. The trail was crowded with students. How do you kidnap a 16-year-old girl in broad daylight, surrounded by dozens of witnesses, without anyone seeing or hearing anything? Unless the abductor knew exactly what they were doing. Unless they moved fast, used the terrain to their advantage, and got her off the trail and into the dense forest before anyone realized what had happened. And here's where the scent trail becomes chilling. Some investigators believe the abrupt end of the scent suggests Trenny was carried. If someone threw her over their shoulder and ran, the scent would be elevated off the ground, making it harder for dogs to track. Theory 3. She ran away. There are rumors, unverified, whispered, that Trenny was seen days or even years later. One story claims she was spotted in a car, looking dazed or drugged, as if she'd been taken against her will. Another suggests she ran away from home and staged her disappearance, but this theory falls apart under scrutiny. Trenny left all her belongings at the parking lot. She had no money, no plan, no history of wanting to run away. And why would a 16-year-old girl on a school field trip in the middle of a crowded trail decide to vanish into the wilderness? Theory 4. Something stranger. This is where we enter missing 411 territory. Trenny's case shares unsettling similarities with other national park disappearances: the sudden vanishing, the abrupt end of the scent trail, the lack of any physical evidence. Some people believe there's something in these mountains, something that takes people. Not an animal, not a person, something else. I don't subscribe to that theory, but I can't deny the strangeness of the scent trail ending like it did. Here's what haunts me about this case. Trenny Gibson was not alone. She was surrounded by people. She was on a popular trail. She was minutes from safety. And she still disappeared. That's the nightmare, isn't it? The idea that even in a crowd, even in broad daylight, even on a marked trail with friends ahead of you and friends behind you, you can still be taken. The buddy system failed. The supervision failed. The trail itself, designed to be safe and accessible, failed. In the weeks after Trenny's disappearance, her classmates were traumatized. Imagine being 16 years old on a school field trip and realizing that the girl who was walking behind you 5 minutes ago is gone forever. Some of those students are in their 60s now, and they still think about Trenny. They still wonder, could we have done something? Could we have saved her? Trenny's family never got closure. No body was ever found. No definitive answers were ever provided. The case remains open. Technically, Trenny Gibson is still a missing person. If you hike the trails around Clingman's Dome today, you might not think about Trenny Gibson. You'll be focused on the views, the fresh air, the beauty of the Smokies. But somewhere on that trail, Maybe at a specific switchback, maybe near a moss-covered rock, Trenny Gibson took her last steps in the world we understand. And then she turned a corner, and she was gone. No scream, no struggle, no goodbye. Just a teenage girl surrounded by friends, swallowed whole by the mountain. The trail doesn't remember her, the trees don't whisper her name, but the people who were there that day, they remember. They remember the girl who vanished from the middle of the line. And they know, deep down they know, that it could have been any of them, because in the wilderness, even when you're not alone, you're never truly safe. And sometimes, all it takes is one corner, one moment, one breath, and you're gone. March 17th, 2012, Newfound Gap, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. If you've driven through the Smokies, you've probably stopped at Newfound Gap. It's the main mountain pass, elevation 546 feet, where Highway 441 crosses from Tennessee into North Carolina. There's a large paved parking lot, a stone observation platform, and on any given day, dozens of tourists snapping photos and breathing in the mountain air. The Appalachian Trail also crosses here. It's one of the most accessible entry points to the AT in the entire park. You can literally park your car, walk 50 feet, and be standing on the most famous hiking trail in America. And on March 17, 2012, a 24-year-old man named Derek Lueking drove to Newfound Gap, parked his white Ford Escape in the lower parking lot, and walked into the woods. He has never been seen again. But here's what makes this case so psychologically disturbing. When park rangers found his car days later, they discovered something that didn't make sense. Inside the vehicle was a brand new tent, a sleeping bag, food, water, maps, a survival hatchet, hundreds of dollars worth of gear, the kind of equipment you'd need to survive in the wilderness for weeks. And on the dashboard, a handwritten note, "Don't try to follow me." Derek Lueking had prepared to survive, but he left all the tools for survival behind. So what was he planning? Was this a suicide mission, a voluntary disappearance, a cry for help that went unanswered? We don't know. Because Derek is still out there, somewhere, or he's been dead for over a decade. And the only clue he left us is that note, "Don't try to follow me." Let me tell you about Derek Lueking. He was 24 years old, originally from Virginia. He stood about 5'11" to 6'8", weighed around 220 pounds, had short brown hair, a short beard, and wore glasses. He had a distinctive tattoo on his chest, Japanese characters that translated to the word life. Derek worked as an orderly at a mental health facility called Peninsula Behavioral Health. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was steady work. He was living with a roommate and seemed to be getting by. But according to his family, something had changed in the months leading up to March 2012. His father later said that Derek had become withdrawn. He'd started drinking more, smoking. He seemed dissatisfied with his life, restless, like he was searching for something but couldn't articulate what. Derek was also a fan of survival shows, specifically Man vs. Wild with Bear Grylls and I Shouldn't Be Alive. He watched these shows obsessively. He was fascinated by the idea of testing yourself against nature, of stripping away modern life and seeing if you could survive with just your wits in your hands. And in the weeks before his disappearance, Derek went shopping. He bought a tent, a sleeping bag, a Gerber survival axe, parachute cord, a military survival manual, a compass. He even purchased a Bear Grylls survival kit, a branded set of tools marketed to wannabe survivalists. It looked like Derek Lueking was planning an extended wilderness adventure. But here's the thing. He didn't take any of it with him. Let's walk through the timeline because the sequence of events is crucial to understanding the mystery. March 16, 2012, evening. Derek checks into a budget hotel in Cherokee, North Carolina, a small tourist town just outside the park. He pays for one night. He doesn't talk much to the front desk clerk, just checks in, goes to his room, and presumably sleeps. March 17, 2012, 4 a.m., Derek checks out. Security footage shows him leaving the hotel with a small dark backpack. He gets in his white Ford Escape and drives away. Here's what's strange. He left a Bible on the bed in the hotel room, and he left a liquor bottle on the floor. Those two items, the Bible and the bottle, paint a picture of someone in the middle of a crisis, someone wrestling with something heavy: spirituality, guilt, desperation. March 17th, 2012, morning. Derek drives to Newfound Gap. He parks his car in the lower parking lot. He gets out, takes his backpack, and walks toward the Appalachian Trail. And then he vanishes. March 19th, 2012. Derek doesn't show up for work. His roommate tries to call him. No answer. His family starts to worry. March 20th, 2012. Derek's family drives to the Smokies searching for him. They find his white Ford Escape parked at Newfound Gap. It's been there for 3 days. They notify park rangers. The car is searched, and this is where the case becomes a psychological puzzle. Let's talk about what was inside Derek's car, because this inventory is the key to understanding, or failing to understand, what Derek was thinking. Things left in the car are tent, sleeping bag, his wallet, cash, maps of the area, food and water supplies, heavy rain gear, Gerber survival axe, parachute cord, Bear Grylls survival kit, pages torn from a military survival manual. Things taken with him presumably are a dark backpack seen on security footage, and possibly the survival axe, some cord, fire-starting tools, and a knife on the dashboard, note written in Derek's handwriting: "Don't try to follow me." Now, let's pause and think about this. If you're planning to survive in the wilderness, you take the tent, you take the sleeping bag, you take the food. These are the basics. These are the difference between life and death in the March Mountains, where temperatures at 5,000 feet drop below freezing at night, but Derek left them all behind. Why? Theory 1. He never intended to survive. The most obvious explanation is that Derek went into those woods to die. The note, "Don't try to follow me," reads like a suicide note. The Bible left in the hotel room, the liquor bottle, the dissatisfaction with his life. All of it points to someone who had made a decision. But here's the problem with this theory. Why buy all the survival gear in the first place? If you're planning to end your life, you don't spend hundreds of dollars on tents and axes and parachute cord. You don't research military survival techniques. You don't check into a hotel near a trailhead unless you're planning to use that trail. So maybe he changed his mind. Maybe he drove to Newfound Gap, sat in that parking lot, looked at all the gear in his trunk, and realized he couldn't do it. Couldn't commit to survival. Couldn't commit to living rough in the woods for weeks. And so he walked into the forest with just a backpack and a knife, intending to end it quickly. But if that's true, why hasn't his body been found? Theory 2. He was starting over. Some people believe Derek was trying to disappear, to walk away from his life, his job, his debts, his problems, and start fresh somewhere else. The note supports this. "Don't try to follow me" could be interpreted as, "I'm leaving my old life behind." But this theory also has major problems. Derek left his wallet, his cash, his ID. How do you start a new life with no money and no identification? How do you get a job? How do you rent an apartment? Unless he had help, unless someone was waiting for him, unless the disappearance was coordinated. But there's no evidence of that. No phone records indicating he was in contact with someone who could facilitate a new identity. No withdrawals of large sums of money in the weeks before he vanished. Theory 3. The change of heart. Here's a darker possibility. Maybe Derek drove to Newfound Gap fully intending to live off the land. He'd watched all those survival shows. He'd bought all the gear. He was going to test himself, prove he could do it. But when he got there, when he stood at the edge of that parking lot and looked at the dark, dense forest stretching out before him, he panicked. Maybe the reality of what he was about to do hit him. Maybe he realized he wasn't Bear Grylls. He was a 24-year-old orderly from Virginia with a backpack and a hatchet, about to walk into one of the most dangerous wilderness areas in the eastern United States in the middle of March. So he left the gear, took just the bare minimum, and walked into the woods not to survive, but to, what? Punish himself? Force a crisis? See if he'd come out the other side? Let's talk about the search because it's important. As soon as Derek's car was found, a massive search operation began. Park rangers, search and rescue teams, volunteers, they combed the trails around Newfound Gap, They used dogs, they used helicopters, and they found nothing. No backpack, no axe, no clothing, no body. There was one reported sighting. A hiker claimed to have seen a man matching Derek's description on a trail not far from Newfound Gap. The man was alone, appeared disoriented, and asked, "Is this the way to Gatlinburg?" But here's the strange part. The man had no visible gear, no backpack, no supplies, just a person walking on the trail. If that was Derek, what happened to his backpack? Did he discard it? Did he leave it somewhere? The sighting was never confirmed, and after that, nothing. Here's what keeps me up at night about this case. The note. "Don't try to follow me. It's not a cry for help. It's not ambiguous. It's a direct command. It's final." And in a way, it worked, because we can't follow him, even if we wanted to. Derek Luking walked into those woods and became invisible. He either died so deep in the backcountry that searchers will never find him, or he somehow managed to walk out on the other side. Maybe hitchhiked, maybe flagged down a car, maybe started a new life under a new name. But I don't think that's what happened. I think Derek went into those woods knowing he wasn't coming back. I think the survival gear was a fantasy, a last-ditch hope that maybe, just maybe, he could make it work. But when the moment came, when he stood at that trailhead and looked at the cold, indifferent mountains, he realized he couldn't. And so he left the tent, left the sleeping bag, left the maps and the food and the tools that could have kept him alive. And he walked into the forest with nothing but the clothes on his back and a note on his dashboard. "Don't try to follow me." Derek's family has never stopped looking. They return to the Smokies every year. They hike the trails, they put up posters, they hold out hope that maybe, somehow, Derek is still out there. But it's been over a decade. The Smoky Mountains are vast, they're dense, they're unforgiving, and they hold their secrets close. If Derek died out there, his body is probably buried under years of leaves, hidden in a ravine, or scattered by animals. The forest has reclaimed him. And if he didn't die, if he somehow made it out and started a new life, then he's the one person in this entire story who got what he wanted: to disappear completely, to leave no trace, to make sure no one could follow. The last thing I want to say is this: if you're struggling, if you're in a place where you're thinking about walking into the woods and not coming back, please talk to someone. Call a hotline, reach out to a friend, because the wilderness doesn't care about your pain. It won't heal you. It will only swallow you whole. Derek Luking left a note telling us not to follow, but I wish someone had followed him before he left. I wish someone had asked him why he was buying all that gear, why he was watching all those survival shows, why he seemed so lost, because maybe, just maybe, someone could have stopped him from walking into those woods. And maybe Derek Luking would still be here, but he's not. He's out there, somewhere, or he's gone. And the only thing we have left is a note on a dashboard and a question we'll never be able to answer. Why did you leave the tent behind, Derek? July 22nd, 2013, the Appalachian Trail, Maine. If you've ever hiked the AT, you know that Maine is the final boss. It's the hardest, most unforgiving section of the entire 2,290-mile trail. The terrain is relentlessly steep, the trails are choked with roots and rocks, and the forest, God, the forest. It's dense boreal woods, thick with spruce and fir and hemlock. The canopy is so tight that even at midday, the forest floor is dim. Moss covers everything. The undergrowth is nearly impenetrable. This is where thru-hikers go to earn their finish. This is where the Appalachian Trail stops being romantic and becomes a test of pure will. And on July 22, 2013, a 66-year-old woman named Geraldine Largay, trail name Inchworm, stepped off the trail to use the bathroom. It was a decision that took less than 10 seconds, and it cost her everything. Because when she tried to return to the trail, she went the wrong way. Just a few degrees off, just a few steps in the wrong direction. And she was lost. For 26 days, Geraldine Largay lived in a tent in the Maine woods, waiting to be rescued. She was less than 2 miles from the trail. She was surrounded by searchers calling her name. Aircraft flew overhead. Dogs tracked the area, but no one found her. And when they finally did, 2 years later, they discovered something that changed everything. A journal, her diary, a record of those 26 days. And in those pages, you can watch a woman move from hope to fear to acceptance. This is the story of Geraldine Largay, and it is one of the most heartbreaking survival stories I've ever encountered. Let me tell you about Jerry. Her full name was Geraldine Largay, but everyone called her Jerry. She was 66 years old, from Brentwood, Tennessee. She was a retired nurse, a wife, a grandmother. By all accounts, she was kind, gentle, and determined. But Jerry had a problem. She was terrible with directions. Her family and friends knew this. Her hiking partner, a woman named Jane Lee, knew this. Even Jerry knew this. She would joke about it, how she could get lost in a parking lot, how she couldn't read a map to save her life. But she wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. It was a dream, a bucket list item, a way to challenge herself and see the country on foot. So in 2013, at the age of 66, Jerry set out to thru-hike the AT. Now, she wasn't doing it the traditional way. She wasn't carrying a 40-pound pack and camping every night in the backcountry. She was slack-packing, hiking with a light day pack while her husband George drove ahead to road crossings and met her with supplies. It's a gentler way to do the trail, and there's no shame in it. It allowed Jerry to hike at her own pace, slowly, steadily, like an inchworm, while still having the support she needed. Her trail name was Inchworm because she was slow, but slow and steady wins the race, right? Jerry and her hiking partner Jane had been making good progress, but in mid-July, Jane had to leave the trail due to a family emergency. For the first time, Jerry was hiking alone. This made her nervous. She had admitted to friends that she was afraid of the dark. Afraid of being alone in the woods, afraid of getting lost, but she pushed forward. George was meeting her at regular intervals. She had a cell phone. She had a tent and supplies. She'd be fine. Except she wasn't. July 22, 2013, 7:15 a.m. Jerry leaves the Poplar Ridge shelter, a wooden lean-to where she'd spent the night. She texts her husband George. About to leave shelter, the message sends. George gets it. Everything's normal. Jerry starts hiking. The trail is rough. Maine always is, but she's moving at her usual pace. Slow, steady. Around 11 a.m., Jerry needs to use the bathroom. This is not unusual. It happens to every hiker. You step off the trail, find a private spot behind a tree or a bush, do your business, and step back to the trail. But when Jerry finishes and tries to return to the trail, she can't find it. She looks around. The forest looks the same in every direction. Thick trees, moss, undergrowth, no clear path. She walks in what she thinks is the right direction, but it's not. She's turned around, disoriented. And just like that, she's lost. At 11:01 a.m., just minutes after stepping off the trail, Jerry pulls out her phone. She tries to text George. In some trouble. Got off trail to go to BR, now lost. Can you call AMC to see if a trail maintainer can help me? Somewhere north of Woods Road. XOX. She hits send. The message doesn't go through. There's no cell service in this part of the Maine woods. The text sits in her phone, unsent, waiting for a signal that will never come. Jerry tries again the next day. July 23rd. Lost since yesterday. Off trail 3 or 4 miles. Call police for what to do PLS. Again, the message fails to send. Jerry is alone. She has no way to call for help, and she has no idea that George is about to sound the alarm. July 24th, 2013. Jerry was supposed to meet George at a road crossing. She doesn't show up. George waits. An hour, 2 hours. He starts to worry. By the afternoon, he calls the authorities. Jerry is officially reported missing. Within hours, a massive search operation is launched. This isn't a small-scale effort. This is one of the largest search operations in Maine history. Game wardens, volunteer search and rescue teams, bloodhounds, aircraft with infrared cameras, hundreds of people combing the woods, calling her name. Jerry! Jerry! The searchers focus on the area near Poplar Ridge where she was last seen. They walk the trails. They bushwhack through the undergrowth. They fly helicopters over the forest canopy, looking for any sign of a tent, a bright color, movement. But they find nothing. Days turn into weeks. The search continues. The hope fades. By mid-August, The official search is called off. The conclusion is grim. Jerry Largay is presumed dead. She either fell and was injured, or she succumbed to exposure quickly. Her body is somewhere in the vast Maine wilderness, and it may never be found. The case goes cold. October 2015, 2 years later. A contract forester is surveying land in Redington Township, Maine. He's working on property owned by the U.S. Navy, a remote restricted area used for SERE, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, training. He's walking through the woods, taking measurements when he sees something that doesn't belong. A tent, not a modern tent, but a tent that's been there for a long time. The fabric is weathered, moss is growing on it, but it's intact. He approaches cautiously. Inside the tent, he finds human remains, a sleeping bag, gear, and a journal. It's Geraldine Largay. She's less than 2 miles from where she left the trail. She was there the entire time, while searchers called her name, while aircraft flew overhead, while dogs tracked the area. She was right there. Now, this is the part that breaks your heart. When investigators recovered Jerry's belongings, they found her journal. And in that journal, she had documented everything, every single day of her 26 days alone in the woods. The early entries are practical. She's trying to stay calm. She's rationing her food. She's hoping searchers will find her soon. July 22nd. Got off trail to do my business, now lost. Can't find trail. She sets up her tent. She decides to stay put. This is the right move. Survival experts say if you're lost, stay in one place. Make yourself visible. Wait for rescue. July 23rd. Still here, trying to conserve phone battery. Tried to text George, but no signal. She hears sounds. Footsteps, animals. She's not sure. July 24th, July 30th. The search is happening. Jerry can hear aircraft overhead. She waves. She tries to make noise, but the canopy is too thick. The planes can't see her. She writes, "I hear them. I know they're looking for me. Why can't they see me?" This is the horror of it. She's not alone in a deserted wilderness. She's in a forest full of people actively searching for her. And yet, she's invisible. Early August. Her food is running out. She's weak. She's trying to stay positive, but the entries are becoming more desperate. Please find me. I don't want to die here. August 6th. This is the entry that destroys me. She writes a letter, a final message. She knows she's not going to make it. When you find my body, please call my husband George. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me. She's not angry. She's not blaming anyone. She's thinking about her family, about George, about the pain of not knowing. She's graceful. Even at the end. August 18th, the last dated entry. After 26 days, Geraldine Largay stopped writing. She probably died shortly after that from starvation, from dehydration, from exposure. The medical examiner couldn't determine the exact cause. After 2 years, there wasn't enough left to say for certain. But she died alone, in a tent, less than 2 miles from the trail. Let's talk about why she wasn't found. Because this is the question that haunts everyone who knows this story. How can a massive search operation, aircraft, dogs, hundreds of trained volunteers, miss a woman living in a tent for 26 days, just 2 miles from where she went missing? The answer is the forest itself. The Maine woods are a spruce trap. The canopy is so dense that from the air, the forest looks like a solid green carpet. You can't see the ground. You can't see a tent. Even thermal imaging has trouble penetrating the thick layers of foliage. From the ground, the undergrowth is so thick that visibility is measured in feet, not yards. You can walk within 50 feet of someone and never see them. Sound doesn't carry. The moss and trees absorb it. Jerry was also on U.S. Navy property. The searchers were focused on the trails and the public land. They didn't have immediate access to the restricted military area where she'd wandered. So she sat there, in her tent, listening to helicopters overhead, hearing voices in the distance, knowing that people were looking for her, but unable to reach them. When they found her, investigators also found something else. Jerry had made a cross out of sticks. She'd placed it near her tent, pointing skyward. She wanted to be found. She wanted her family to have closure. Even in her final days, starving and alone, she was thinking of others. The Geraldine Largay case changed how search and rescue operates. It highlighted the deadly combination of thick forest, poor cell reception, and the psychological trap of staying put. Because here's the cruel irony. If Jerry had kept walking, if she'd ignored the survival advice to stay in one place, she might have stumbled onto a logging road. She was only about 20 minutes walk from one, but she did what she was supposed to do. She stayed put. She waited for rescue. And rescue never came. I think about Jerry a lot. I think about her sitting in that tent, writing in her journal, listening to the searchers calling her name. I think about the hope she must have felt every time she heard an aircraft, the crushing disappointment when it flew past without seeing her. I think about the moment she realized she wasn't going to make it, the moment she wrote that final letter to George. And I think about how close she was. 2 miles from the trail. 20 minutes from a road, so close and yet impossibly far. If you're planning to hike, especially solo, please learn from Jerry's story. Carry a GPS device, not just a phone. Phones lose signal. GPS units with SOS buttons can save your life. Tell someone your exact route. Not, I'm hiking in Maine, but I'm on the AT between shelter X and shelter Y. And if you get lost, don't just stay put. Make yourself visible. Use bright colors. Make noise. Move toward high ground where cell signals might reach. Jerry did everything she thought was right, and it still wasn't enough. Because the wilderness doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care how kind you are, how determined you are, how much your family loves you. It only cares about whether you can find your way out. And Jerry couldn't. She died 2 miles from safety, surrounded by people looking for her, unable to bridge that final impossible distance. Rest in peace, Inchworm. You deserved better. September 25th, 1981. Deep Creek Trail, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Deep Creek is not the wild, rugged backcountry that people imagine when they think of the Smokies. It's a gentle, family-friendly area near Bryson City, North Carolina. There's a big campground. There are picnic areas. Kids go tubing in the creek. The trails are wide, well-maintained, and mostly flat. This is where retirees go for a leisurely afternoon walk. This is where you bring your grandmother. And on September 25th, 1981, a 58-year-old woman named Thelma Pauline Melton, everyone called her Polly, was hiking this easy trail with 2 of her friends. They were walking slowly, chatting, enjoying the afternoon sun filtering through the trees. And then, in a span of maybe 3 minutes, Polly Melton disappeared. Not on a remote mountain peak, not in a storm, not in the middle of the night, in broad daylight, on a crowded trail, with her friends less than 100 yards behind her. She walked around a gentle bend in the path, and she was never seen again. No body has ever been found, no clothing, no trace. And here's the part that makes this case so deeply unsettling. Polly Melton was not physically capable of running away. She had high blood pressure, she was overweight, she was a heavy smoker, she'd been complaining of nausea all day. She could barely walk a mile without needing to rest. So how did she vanish so completely that even search dogs couldn't track her? That's the mystery we're going to try to unravel today. Let me tell you about Polly Melton. She was 58 years old, a grandmother, a churchgoer. She lived in a small community in Tennessee and was well liked by everyone who knew her. She wasn't an adventurer or an athlete. She was just a regular woman living a quiet life. But Polly had some health problems. She suffered from high blood pressure and was on medication for it. She was also a heavy smoker, probably a pack a day, if not more. And on the day of her disappearance, she'd been feeling nauseous. Her friends later said she'd been under the weather, but insisted she wanted to go on the hike anyway. Polly was also significantly overweight. Now, I'm not mentioning this to be unkind. It's a crucial detail for understanding what happened next. Because when you're trying to figure out how someone disappeared, you have to look at what they were physically capable of doing. And Polly Melton was not capable of running. She wasn't capable of scrambling up a hillside, diving into dense underbrush, or sprinting down a trail to evade someone. She was a slow walker. Her friends described her as the slowest of their group. When they hiked together, Polly set the pace and everyone else adjusted. So keep that in mind as we go through what happened that day. September 25th, 1981, Friday afternoon. Polly wakes up at home. She's been making spaghetti sauce. She leaves it on the stove, ready to finish cooking when she gets back that evening. This is an important detail. People who are planning to disappear forever don't prep dinner. Around 4 p.m., Polly meets up with two friends, Trula Lufkin and a man named Bob Redden. They decide to go for a hike at Deep Creek, a trail Polly had walked many times before. She'd been coming to this trail for 20 years. She knew it like the back of her hand. They drive to the trailhead and start walking. It's a beautiful day, not too hot. The trail is easy, mostly flat, following alongside the creek. There are other hikers around, families, couples, kids playing in the water. They hike for about 30 minutes, reaching a turnaround point maybe a mile or so from the trailhead. They rest for a bit, then start heading back. And this is where everything changes. On the way back, Polly suddenly picks up her pace. Her friends later said this was unusual. Polly was typically the slow one, lagging behind, needing frequent breaks. But on this particular stretch, she seemed to feel better. Maybe the nausea had passed. Maybe she just wanted to get back to the car. Whatever the reason, Polly starts walking faster than normal. She pulls ahead of Trula and Bob by maybe 50 yards. The trail curves gently to the left around a small rise. Nothing dramatic, just a typical bend in the path. Polly rounds that corner and disappears from view. Trula and Bob keep walking at their normal pace. They're not worried. Polly is just ahead. They'll catch up in a minute. They round the corner. The trail is empty. Polly is gone. Now, let's pause here and think about the timeline. From the moment Polly disappeared from their view to the moment they rounded the corner, maybe 2 to 3 minutes passed. Let's be generous and say 5 minutes. In that 5-minute window, Polly Melton vanished. The trail ahead was straight and visible for at least another 100 yards. There was no side trail, no bathroom facilities, no obvious place to step off the path. Trula and Bob call out, "Polly! Polly!" Nothing. They walk faster, assuming she's just farther ahead than they thought. Maybe she kept going all the way back to the parking lot. They reach the parking lot. Polly's not there. They check the car. She's not inside. They wait. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. Polly never shows up. By evening, they're panicking. They notify park rangers. A search begins immediately. Here's where the case becomes physically impossible. Search teams arrive within hours. They search the entire trail, every inch of it, between the point where Polly was last seen and the parking lot. They look in the woods on either side of the trail. They check the creek. Nothing. Bloodhounds are brought in the next day. These are trained tracking dogs, some of the best in the business. They're given an item with Polly's scent, a piece of her clothing or something from her car. The dogs track her scent to the exact spot where her friends last saw her, and then the scent just stops. Not fades away, not leads into the woods. It stops. Dead. As if Polly Melton ceased to exist at that precise location. The handlers are baffled. This isn't normal. Even if someone gets into a vehicle, there's usually residual scent. Even if someone walks into water, dogs can typically pick up the trail on the other side. But here, nothing. It's as if Polly was lifted into the air and carried away. So let's talk about the theories. Because over the past 40-plus years, investigators and amateur sleuths have tried to make sense of this. Theory 1. She ran into the woods. The most obvious explanation, Polly left the trail. She wandered into the forest, got disoriented, and died of exposure or injury. Her body is still out there, hidden under decades of leaf litter and undergrowth. But here's the problem with this theory. Polly was physically incapable of moving fast enough to get off the trail into dense woods and out of earshot of her friends in the 3 to 5 minutes before they rounded the corner. She was 58, overweight, a smoker with high blood pressure and nausea. The terrain off-trail is steep and tangled with rhododendron. Even a young, fit person would struggle to move quickly through that vegetation, and her friends would have hurt her. Crashing through the underbrush makes noise, breaking branches makes noise, falling makes noise, but there was no sound. Theory 2. She was abducted. This is the darkest possibility. Maybe someone grabbed her, pulled her off the trail, silenced her before she could scream. But again, the logistics don't make sense. It was a Friday afternoon on a popular trail. There were other hikers around. How do you abduct a 58-year-old woman in broad daylight without anyone seeing or hearing anything? And the search dogs would have picked up the scent of another person. They would have tracked the path of the abductor. But the dogs found nothing. Theory 3. She faked her death. This is the theory that gained the most traction and the most controversy. In the weeks following Polly's disappearance, investigators started digging into her personal life, and they found some interesting things. Polly's minister, a man she was very close to, had recently died. There were whispers in the community that their relationship might have been more than pastoral, that maybe Polly and the minister had been having an affair. Investigators also found evidence of strange phone calls. Records showed that someone had been making calls from a payphone near the trailhead around the time of Polly's disappearance. The calls were to numbers that couldn't be immediately traced. Some theorized that Polly had planned her disappearance, that she met someone at the trailhead, maybe a lover, maybe a friend, and they drove away together. She wanted to start a new life, free from the scrutiny of her small town, free from the grief of losing the minister. The spaghetti sauce? A red herring. The slow pace? An act to make sure her friends would be far enough behind when she made her move. But here's where this theory falls apart. Polly left behind her purse, her medication, her blood pressure pills, medication she needed to take regularly or risk serious health consequences. She never touched her bank accounts. She never used her social security number again. There were no sightings, no new identity, no evidence that Polly Melton continued to exist anywhere. If she ran away to start over, she did it with no money, no ID, no medication, and no resources. And then she vanished so completely that even the US government couldn't find a trace of her for 40 years. That's not a successful disappearance. That's death. Here's what I think happened, and I want to be clear. This is speculation, but it's based on the facts we have. I think Polly Melton had a medical emergency. She'd been feeling nauseous all day. She had high blood pressure. She was a smoker. All of these are risk factors for a cardiac event or a stroke. Maybe in those few minutes when she was ahead of her friends, something went catastrophically wrong. Maybe she had a heart attack or a stroke. Maybe she stumbled off the trail, disoriented and in distress, and collapsed somewhere just out of sight. But if that's true, where's her body? This is the part I can't explain. The search was thorough. They combed the area for weeks. They brought in cadaver dogs years later, and they found nothing. Some people believe her body was taken by animals, bears or wild boars. But that doesn't explain the complete lack of any trace. No clothing, no bones, nothing. Others believe she fell into the creek and was carried downstream. But the creek at Deep Creek isn't deep or fast enough to carry a body very far, and searchers checked the waterways extensively. There's one more detail I haven't mentioned yet, and it's the one that keeps this case in the realm of high strangeness. Polly was wearing distinctive clothing, a pink and white striped sleeveless blouse and tan polyester pants. These aren't exactly camouflage. They should have been visible against the green and brown of the forest. She was also wearing a heavy diamond-studded watch and a wedding band. These are items that would have been found if her body had decomposed in the woods. Jewelry doesn't disintegrate. So where is it? Where is any of it? 44 years later, Thelma Polly Melton is still missing. Her case remains one of the most baffling disappearances in National Park Service history. She was a woman who could barely walk a mile without resting, a woman with serious health problems, a woman who'd been hiking the same trail for 20 years. And yet, in the span of 3 to 5 minutes on a sunny Friday afternoon, surrounded by other hikers, she walked around a corner and ceased to exist. No body, no evidence, no answers. Just a pot of spaghetti sauce sitting on a stove, waiting for a woman who would never come home. If you're out hiking and you lose sight of your friend for even a minute, don't assume they're just ahead. Don't assume they've gone back to the car. Call out to them. Wait for a response. Because the Polly Melton case teaches us a terrifying lesson. You can lose someone in seconds, on a crowded trail, in broad daylight, in a place that feels as safe as your own backyard. The wilderness doesn't care about logic. It doesn't care about what should or shouldn't be possible. And sometimes, just sometimes, people vanish in ways that defy every rational explanation. Polly Melton walked into the woods, and the woods kept her.